Hi there. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It is an utter pleasure to be here. I've long wanted to come to Israel. This is my first trip. There was a shout out about this book, which I wrote and deals with some of the things that we've been talking about. I really appreciated Ido Bruno's introduction to this session because I think a lot of what we do is about reframing. And that's something that I'm going to do here today. So if you put AI is the new into Google, you learn a couple of things. AI is the new black. AI is the new user interface. McKinsey says it's the next digital frontier. Andrew Ng says it's the new electricity. MIT Technology Review says AI is the new space race, if we want to think a little bit about this morning's session. And the US needs a Sputnik moment. And this one, AI is dreaming up new kinds of video games, has the word new 6 times in the first screen, although one of them is New York, so it kind of doesn't count. Google's AI is the new paradigm that unites humans and machines, and I'm apparently even the new AI. But the fact is that AI isn't the new anything because AI isn't new. And just to put a point on how new it is not, John McCarthy coined the term artificial intelligence in 1955 when he invited a number of people to attend the Dartmouth conference, which put in place the platform for a lot of what we still do today in artificial intelligence. He described AI as making machines do things that would require intelligence if done by people. But we could look back before that. We could look back to Alan Turing, who wrote in 1950, "I propose to consider the question, can a machine think?" Arthur Samuel is the person who may not have coined the term machine learning, but is best known or best connected to it. And what you see him doing here is playing checkers with a computer. And he described machine learning as programming a digital computer to behave in a way which, if done by human beings or animals, would be described as involving the process of learning. Here's Marvin Minsky. He said in 1961, "I believe that we were on the verge of an era that will be strongly influenced by and quite possibly dominated by intelligent problem-solving machines." And so it kind of gives me pause when someone like Elon Musk, who we just saw a moment ago, and some of his friends like Jeff Bezos declare that this is an era of artificial intelligence. Because by my math, that era did not start in 2016, as this picture might state. That started a long time earlier. We can get into other kinds of cliches. If you want to do another Google image search on AI, this is what AI looks like. You get these kind of vectory heads, sort of laser beams. I like this one, behold the hand, and then there's the chip. And one of my students, my master's student, Jae-Yoon Ha, says he did a screen grab and figured out what the color palette was. And he said, "These colors and shapes are quite familiar to me when I think of AI." He points out that they're cold and isolating and lonely. We could search a little bit more. If you notice up at the top, you see these kinds of ways to zoom into a certain kind of category in Google image search. And so this is human, and two of the possibilities here are human and female. And if you choose female, this is what you get. And if you look at the top, you see things like female, sci-fi, bot, dark, and evil. This is one of my favorite of the kind of fembots of Google image searches. I think that this is jQuery going on over her face, and I'll leave it to those of you who code JavaScript to sort out what that means for the future. She shows up in a lot of different things. She's in an article about how Brits fear the AI future, so it's not just Brexit, but cyborg lady. IBM Watson, she's got a job at IBM, the ingredient brand helping inform the purposeful business of tomorrow. And then finally, she works at IKEA. AI embedded in furniture, IKEA is considering. And the thing is we see this kind of fembot female in a lot of different movies. In the movie Ex Machina, she's the kind of ever-evolving person who's going to capture her capturers, her captors. Or there are movies like Her, where Theodore here is having a relationship with his operating system, played by Scarlett Johansson. Or, of course, Minority Report. And the various moves in Minority Report were designed by John Underkoffler, who got his PhD at MIT, and a lot of his research was about holograms. But again, these ideas are not very new. We can look back to the genesis of the term robot, which comes from a 1921 play called Rossum's Universal Robots. And Rossum refers to rationality. And here you see something not going very well for one of the humans in the play in 1921. Or this is, I think, from the Berlin production in 1923. And of course, then there's Hal. And Hal is 50 years old, 51 years old this year, and his statement, "I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that," bodes pretty poorly for people and for how we feel about sci-fi in the future. Aha, here's the future. And I have to appreciate what Saul was just showing about future cities. This one is particularly bad. Like, there's the future. I kind of like that fortune cookie right there when we want to take a look at it. But I live in the future. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And in Pittsburgh, we are the center of autonomous vehicle research in the United States. So I live in a city of the future, a city that was built in 1787 that has a lot of brick buildings. And what you see right here is the National Robotics Engineering Center, which is where a lot of robotics research goes on, and Carnegie Robotics, where a lot of Carnegie Mellon's robotics research is commercialized. Both of these buildings are about 1 kilometer from my house. And sometimes I go out at night with my husband and our dog, and we go for a walk, and we see things like these fields that are going to be developed. This is Carnegie Robotics. This is a little less than 1 kilometer from our house in our neighborhood. And you can see kind of over time what happens. They cleared out the weeds in the meadow. And then, boom, what do you know? We have a place called Tech Forge, where Caterpillar finally has its own location. For a long time, Carnegie Mellon has done research with Caterpillar on autonomous vehicles or autonomous tools for landscaping and construction. Or you could see something like this about 2 kilometers away in the Strip District, which grows up to be Argo's building, Argo's headquarters for more autonomous vehicles and self-driving cars. And this is one of Pittsburgh's famous bridges with a prototype self-driving vehicle. We have them all over our city. Or this is Uber ATG, the Advanced Technology Group, not very far from here, again, right in the dense urban core of Pittsburgh. And late at night, this is back to us walking with our dog. We see the autonomous backhoes parked there. And you see this picture here. I'm reminded of a Max Ernst painting called Lop Lop Introduces Lop Lop and surrealist paintings. This is kind of what it looks like to me. And indeed, Caterpillar tells us perception is everything on their website, looking into their Pittsburgh Automation Center. And so we head back to my house, which I can spot on Google Image Search and Google Street View. And this is my house of the future that was built in 1890. And that's my dog. And that's my mother-in-law that Google Street View caught. And my dog's looking back. It might be suitable to tell you his name is really Emoji. So what do we mean anyway when we say intelligence? When I went to Oxford, the Oxford English Dictionary, which is my go-to place for the meanings of words and where they come from, I found a couple of things. I find out that it refers to things like understanding and comprehension and quickness. That it means both a rational being and an alien, something that we could see in the movies Ex Machina and Her, and probably just about every science fiction movie that features AI gone good or gone bad. It means obtaining or exchanging information, not just artificial intelligence, but military intelligence. And it means learning and adapting. And again, I find myself thinking of Alan Turing, who in that same piece that he wrote in 1950 said that presumably the child brain is something like a notebook as one buys from the stationers, rather little mechanism and lots of blank sheets. And he thought that maybe the way intelligence would happen is that we build over time, that we've got these blank sheets and we fill them up just the way we'd fill up our notebooks. Whose intelligence? This is emoji again. And I like to say he's a case of if this, then dog. He knows things I don't know. It's all predicated on when I'm going to be leaving the house and whether he's coming or not. So he sniffs my pant legs, and certain pant legs are better than others. If I close my laptop or brush my teeth, he hides. But we also might have something like swarm intelligence. And we've read a lot in the last number of years, both in scientific and popular nonfiction science, about canine cognition, like the work of Alexander Horowitz or Gregory Bean, or swarm intelligence. These ideas, though, again, are not new, and I promised Saul Singer a shout out to J.C.R. Licklider. J.C.R. Licklider put in place a lot of the framework that we have not only for artificial intelligence, but also for ARPANET, which became the internet. And in 1960, he wrote an article called Man-Computer Symbiosis. And what he said of this human-computer symbiosis is that it would involve a very close coupling between the human and electronic members of the partnership. And when we say symbiosis today, which we hear a lot when we talk about notions of AI, that's exactly what we're talking about. That's where the word comes from. We talk about reason, learning, and surprise. And here's the uncanny valley. I think we've gotten a little bit of uncanniness here and there. And the uncanny valley was published in an article in 1970 talking about the weirdness we feel when robots get a little bit too real, robots or puppets or something. So this shows like industrial robot, human likeness. It's good, good, good. Ooh, creepy, not good. And then, you go back up, and that space in between is the uncanny valley. And what Masahiro Mori said in this article in 1970 is we should begin to build an accurate map of the uncanny valley so that through robotics research, we can come to understand what makes us human. He also did this weird typology and ontology of eeriness and things that are dead that's also kind of fascinating, but I'll leave it to you to read. And I like also these ways that we can use technology and AI to understand what makes us human. I'm a big fan of Janelle Shane's work. Janelle Shane runs a website called AI Weirdness, and she trains neural nets to do things. In this case, she trained them to name guinea pigs. So she's named them Hanger Dan and Princess Pow and a bunch of other really funny things. As my husband says, it takes, any kid could name a guinea pig Princess Pow, but only a neural net could name it Hanger Dan. She fed the neural net a bunch of paint formulas and colors. And here you see a bunch of paint names like Dope, Bank Butt, Carrington, and Burble Simp. And she's looked at how neural nets learn to recognize images. So here you see, she keeps saying that they hallucinate sheep. Do you see sheep here? You probably don't, but the neural net believes they're there because it knows if it sees a certain kind of landscape, then sheep are probably there. So she colored some of the sheep orange, and it thought it saw flowers. And then she really punked it. She fed it some goats in a tree, and it thought it was maybe a giraffe or a flock of birds. And what she says about this is that if life plays by the rules, image recognition works well, but as soon as people or sheep do something unexpected, the algorithms show their weaknesses. And on my way to the session this morning, I was wandering around Marcel Duchamp's Pissoir and a number of famous surrealist works that I know well. And I think of the point in time at which those works were made, when it was really necessary to call attention to the state of the world by using art. And I start to wonder, maybe there are possibilities for neural nets to do the same. And again here, this notion of surprise is really important. And Marvin Minsky said again in 1960 that intelligence seems to denote little more than the complex of performances which we happen to respect but do not understand. We could even look a lot further back. This is Vaucanson's defecating duck, which basically you fed it grain. In 1739, you cranked the grain, and it pooped out the grain. And the reason for building these kinds of automata, as they were called, were to understand what it meant to be alive, what it meant to be biological, and what it meant to be mechanical. Oops. Can I get some sound here, please, on this? And then I'll start this over. And I want to show just another version, thank you, of this. This is by Madeline Gannon, who got her PhD from Carnegie Mellon in architecture a couple of years ago. She trained an industrial robot to respond to people and to be something that they play with. And if you don't respond enough, it gets bored. Yeah, we'd had it set up before, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And then we got it? Oh, no.
Oh.
Oh, dear. Oh, technology. You got it? But when this plays, I want you to listen closely to what she says. You know, we can skip it if it's. My best friend says that at the beginning of every conference call is that 7-minute period where everyone norms technology. And I think the corollary is that will always happen in every conference at least once.
Comes together and you're in the space with the robot.
All right, I'll back up and start again. So what she's going to say is something about how we play with technology and how we do it in a way to question our knowledge.
When everything comes together and you're in space with the robot and you just have a very raw experience with this animal-like machine responding to your every move, all the technical aspects sort of melt away into the background. It's incredibly important to have opportunities and spaces to come in and experiment and misuse these existing technologies.
So having formats and spaces and opportunities to misuse existing technologies are important ways for us to understand what they do. And in this case, this is an industrial robot that is living in the Design Museum in London. But there's something else that we can learn from it. So what of design? I think everyone here today has spent a moment or two trying to talk about design. So as I conclude, I'm going to talk about design and futures and the way they come together for us in ways for us to understand the futures of technology. Design is where the rubber meets the road. Every time we experience technology, some way or another, a design decision has been made, whether conscientiously or not. So 4 thoughts on the role of design. One is that design is good at framing problems. So I could ask you, can you please design me a vase? And you're going to come up with something like this. But if instead I say, can you please come up with a beautiful way for people to incorporate flowers and plants in their lives, you're going to come up with something very different. And as my mentor, Shelley Evans, says, contemporary design changes the questions. 2, designers try to understand people and their contexts. And I snuck in a shout out here to Gabrielle Guthrie, who was presenting this morning about her work with Moxley and what happens when you think about women in the world and their need to pump breast milk and being able to do it on the go and on the move. And by understanding that context, you come up with a different kind of solution. 3, we all know that data visualization is definitely a design question, but what about how we collect that data and how? And one thing that I could point out is that when the city of Boston fed a set of very advanced algorithms all of the school bus start times and changed the school bus schedules for children in the city, they had achieved a way to bring down the CO2 levels and get everybody to school in the most efficient way. And it was a crashing failure. People lost their jobs, politicians were voted out of office, and they had to roll it back. They forgot to include humans and residents in that process. Participatory design has a role. And finally, design's a process. And we all use the word operationalize. In fact, I think there's a fetish of operationalization, if I can say it, and optimize and optimization. And I want to point out that, again, if you do a Google image search on design processes, you are going to come up with numerous different ones, all of which start with something like empathize or brainstorm or define when you start a design process. And indeed, design is a process. Operationalizing is just one part of it. Use the whole thing. Hugh Dubberly says in his compendium, How Do You Design?, which is 130 pages of design processes from different people. If we wish to improve our products, we must improve our processes. We must continually redesign not just our products, but also the way we design. So as we look into the future then, what about the future? And my gradient is a nod to the future here. There are many possible futures, as my colleague, the futurist Stuart Candy, likes to point out. And he popularized, but did not invent this particular futures cone. You can think of a hand shining a flashlight, and that flashlight makes a beam of light that you can kind of see on the wall. And we have possible futures, we have plausible futures, and we have probable futures, but we also might have preferable futures. So how can we choose those futures? What's the most optimistic way? And we have a choice of what those futures are. There isn't just one. We need to take the long view. That's not the 18-month or the quick exit of VC, but that's 5+ years. You're going to need multiple perspectives along the way and a willingness to challenge your biases. And as Lisa K. Solomon says, the future doesn't have to be something that happens to us. The future is a question of design. Remember that we still don't have machines that pick raspberries because human hands need to do it, and AI does not allow us to do that very well. And when we over-optimize, we end up in ruts, because if we don't build enough noise into a system, if we don't build enough noise into our algorithms, we can get stuck in place. And as a billboard not very far from my house says, I don't think we're all out jobs yet. Thank you very much.